This is Take 5 with Bentley, Nevada. In studio again today is Darren Evans, Global Commercial Hardware Leader for Bentley, Nevada. And Darren has a particular focus right now on the Orbit 60 platform. A couple reasons. It's the flagship machine protection system. It's brand new. It's being launched to the market pretty much as we speak. And Darren, in the last conversation, the last episode, you talked a little bit about this idea of a bridging module, and that's going to spawn a lot of questions, I think, in people's minds, and this idea of being able to have two separate physical chassis that can act as though they're one kind of virtual chassis. So let's talk a little bit about these concepts.
Sure. So I think if you look at Orbit 60, the bridging or the connecting multiple racks together concept really achieves a bunch of limitations that are out there today. The first one is if I have a large quantity system or a large channel count system that I need to put on a large machine with multiple different gearboxes, let's say, you could easily exceed the channel count of most of the traditional systems that are out there today. So with Orbit 60, when you hit the maximum of that 3U 20-slot chassis and you want to expand upon your monitoring, you simply add another 3U chassis and connect two bridge modules to one system to the next. And it really is just an extension of that backplane to the next chassis that you connect into it. So really, we like to say Orbit 60 doesn't really have a limitation on the number of channels you can bring in if you think of it from a footprint of a hardware perspective, but you want to stay within that 88 dynamic channel boundary when you look at your old bridge system.
So for people, I guess, familiar with a distributed control system, there's always been this idea of I/O that's distributed and it's connected by these high-speed, industrially hardened networks. When you talk about, the connections from one bridge module to the next, is it fiber optic? Is it copper? Is it Ethernet? What's used to connect these racks and make this so-called virtual backplane?
So each bridge module has three connections, and if you're in a protection environment, we would absolutely indicate that you'd want to use all three connections, and they're all based on redundancy. So every connection on a bridge module communicates the exact same data stream from one connection to the next. So for example, if somebody in the field disconnected a cable, a wire was cut, the system is going to have 3 layers of redundancy to make sure that communication happens between both systems. The connection from one system to the next is done multiple different ways. We have an Ethernet ability, so you can do just standard Ethernet cabling. You're limited on distance when you go with Ethernet wiring, so that would be more applicable when you're in a control room environment, going to one cabinet to the next or one rack to the next. The other option is going to be fiber optics. And from a fiber optic perspective, we're looking at going up to 2 kilometers from a fiber optic perspective from one chassis to the next chassis from a bridging standpoint. And so from a fiber, we're going to have industry-leading connectivity on each of those bridge modules. The exact connector type is still being determined, but that'll be announced here as we get to the end of the year.
Can you have multiple bridge modules in a chassis?
Absolutely. So really, there's no limitation there. What we traditionally see is one bridge module from one system to the next because it has 3 layers of redundancy built into it. However, if a customer wants redundancy at a module level, you can add multiple bridge modules to a chassis.
Okay, so not only redundant media in terms of the fiber or the copper, but redundant modules. So that pretty bulletproof connection.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that was one of the fundamentals from a redundancy standpoint, availability standpoint. We wanted to be able to accommodate all the variations out there.
Okay. Well, now that we've talked a little bit about how it works with the modules and the various media you can use to connect these modules, I think what we'll do in the next episode is we'll talk a little bit about applications. What customer problems does this solve? And I know you came out from those 200 customer interviews with a head full of good feedback on needs that customers had and probably how this particular feature can address that. So with that, we'll have Darren back in for another visit. You've been listening to Take 5 with Bentley, Nevada, a Baker Hughes business.